Okay, we are back. Round 3. Milind's going up against Grandmaster Aleksandr Lenderman. Pretty cool. Tweet. Tweet. Okay, let's just make sure everything's fine. Looks as though we're live. This time we've got the chess base board up. And I might try to use it for analysis. I might not. I'm still unsure if the window capture for the actual game will work properly while I'm in chess base. I don't know if that will be the case. But we've still got the art up. Test it out. Boom, e4. Yes, it works. Okay. Lenderman. Okay. Like I said earlier today, terrific last couple of years. He was in the runnings for the U.S. Championship this year. So clearly Lenderman's been working on his game during the pandemic as well as a lot of the kids out here. They do start at, as I understand it, they start 6 p.m. locally. Of course, for what was it? Was it round? For one of the rounds of the World Championship, I woke up at 4:30 this morning. Not this morning, but 4:30 that morning to stream it, and it was a rest day. That was the second rest. No, that was round 3. Something like, or do they start with 2 or 3? I'm not sure. We may check on the North American Open as well. This is board 4, by the way. Christopher, you on board 3. Interesting. Did Stearman hold? You know what? I had Josiah's colors backwards for the last stream. Josiah won with the black pieces. The white was lost. Okay, so chess 24 can fill in the colors a little better. My bad. Okay, here we go. Once again, this is a U2100 stream, so trying to figure out what Lenderman's doing will likely not be so easy. for me commentating on this stream. But we're approaching this from our local point of view here. And then student watching this, future student, current student. Once you start playing in the open section, then you're kind of on your own. But you'll know what to do when you get there. In terms of Lenderman, you'll be able to at some point compete against players of his caliber. Alright, so C4, this is kind of like a little bit of a reverse pelican, somewhat, of a Sicilian. When black plays their E6 and then C5, or C5 and then E6. Pelican, Alcatraz in Spanish. So here we're going to have a transposition. Knight F3 often transposes to D pawn systems. Usually does. D and C pawn systems. Whoops. Right. I'm still getting used to the paint application. Okay, so we've got like a semi-Slav here. We may well, I'm not sure how no one plays these. He may want to try to get in an A6, B5 kind of thing. But he can't drop any material, so I don't think so. You would take, and then you'd get in a B5, but you'd have to break with C5. So sometimes we see a capture here, and then the bishop's going to take, and you see a B5 to biff the bishop. But you have to play A6 first, and then you'd play B5. So here, I don't think it's going to quite work. You'd have to have A6 first. And then you break with C5. But you don't want to be too tardy when you do that. So, okay, castle. So plan the direction your main pawn chain points. White's main pawn chain is pointing this direction. This is the main pawn chain. Is F2 to D4. So white wants to play on the queen side. A lot of beginning players will be very tempted to play a move like C5 in the opening, in the very early middle game, and think that it's a good idea. Does it biff the bishop? Yes. But does it invade too early? Yes. And white would not be in such a position to keep that square just yet. We would see a B6 and an immediate challenge by black on C5. So those type of moves, those invading moves in chess, invasion is a big deal. And it's much easier for the defender to target the invader because the invader is closer to the defender's pieces and further away from its army. So make sure when you invade, you can keep the real estate. Unless you're provoking, you know, if it's with a piece, you can back off. But with this pawn, you're forever going to be there. So we're seeing both bishops go to a fianchetto. We call these bishops over here. This bishop on B2 and its counterpart on B7. We call that beginning student. We call that a fianchetto. It's an Italian word. That's an A, fianchetto. This is so clean. I need to find a better way to write, because this is almost comical. Fianchetto. That is level, no matter what anyone else says. So fianchetto. A bishop on b7, g7, b2, or g2. It's on its long diagonal, so it has a lot of potential. Okay, bishop d3. A lot of players with like a Queen's Gambit declined idea. So the bishop initially sustains the pawn on c4. But when a player plays b3, they may well take with the b pawn if there's a capture on c4, so as to keep the bishop on this diagonal. Because if the bishop goes to c4 instead, it's what we call biting granite. If there's an exchange on c4 and this bishop goes to c4, it would be attacking, assuming that this pawn takes, of course, it would be attacking a pawn chain from the front, which is biting granite. It has no play on that diagonal. It's going to have to get off of it, or something else is going to have to happen to assist it on the diagonal. So when a player plays b3, they may well, not always, but they may well take with the pawn. And that's an idea perhaps you can use if you're trying to save a tempo, as in you don't want a tempo trick to happen and you're playing a Queen's Gambit decline system. Maybe use the b pawn. Maybe. If you want to play it that cheap, you can try to do that. Some players don't mind at all losing the tempo. It's really up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. Got a little epaulets going here. The queen is wearing epaulets. We've got epaulets on the shoulders for the queen here. For both armies. Now, of course, this isn't copying. The c-pawn's... Whoops. The c-pawn is different. But, of course, you don't want to copy past move 6. Just don't do it. Copycat. Queen's knights are different as well. This is different, so it's fine. I haven't seen Lenderman's games from this event. I haven't seen his games recently. I didn't see round 9 from the previous Charlotte tournament. Haven't seen that yet. In other chess news, the World Rapid Championships, I saw after round 8. I'm not sure what position a lot of players are there. I'm not even sure where that's taking place right now. But Gareev was tied with Hans Niemann, or Nyman, I'm really not sure how you pronounce his last name, but Hans, who used to live in the Bay Area. And that was pretty cool. I'll have to check out those games as well. Carlsen was leading. Black is going to set up for, appears to be a c5 pawn break. H3, huh? I did check Lenderman out right before this round started. His USCF card. He does still play out of New York. And in Vegas, in the open section, uh, Coach Shosh had 1 out of 2. His brother Jakat had 1 out of 2, and Krishna had yet to score after 2 rounds. I haven't seen any games from there yet. So H3, okay, so at some point you're gonna have to break. Now, pawn breaks are very important in chess. Let's pretend that Milind never moves another pawn. Let's just pretend. How are his pieces going to seek play? They don't have anywhere to go. There's nothing really to do for any of the black pieces. Where does this knight go if a pawn doesn't move to give it something to do? It has nowhere to go, nowhere good, except for backwards isn't good. It has nowhere good to go. This bishop can't do anything if a pawn doesn't help. Neither can this. I mean, the knight can go to f8, fine, but of course it's not helping with c5 because there's no c5 break. So the knight can go to f8, and then, okay, it can go to g6, but then what? Where does it go? What does it do? It goes nowhere. Maybe that you can try to weasel something on h4, but it's too awkward, and then what do you do when you get there? These rooks can't do a thing with these pawns in the way. So pawn breaks are very important in this level. If you play in the expert section, play in the open section, pawn breaks are really important. You're playing U1200 at the local quads. Are pawn breaks important? No, they're not. The opponent's, well, somebody's going to blunder if not both players. U1500, are pawn breaks important? No. But when those players, U1500, transition to, say, U1800, U2000, they may break incorrectly with the wrong pawn, or they may not break at all, or they may break late. They may break a move too late. So pawn breaks, very important for the developing player. Okay, yeah, Milind got in c5. So here, note how the main pawn chain for Milind is this direction, so that's why he's breaking. Playing the direction your main pawn chain points, so that's why c5 was correct. What's just out of curiosity, how does, I'm sure Lenderman's strong on all time controls, but what's his rapid rating? He's over 2700. Quick rating, Blitz, yeah, not an issue for him at all. Number 2 in New York. Who else plays out of New York? Does Hikaru play out of New York? We need 2. Okay, so is white going to break with e4? No. What is this about going to a6? He's going to a6. We do see sometimes the queen, when she develops, she stays close to home. So she's not vulnerable, and she can really help a battery go a lot of different ways. There's a lot of ways you can potentially use the queen. Not have her vulnerable and kind of slice your way. It looks like he wants a bishop, a6. Because he's not going to break with e4 with the queen on e2. That's not going to work. The queen's not going to f1. That's too weird. She's not going anywhere else. So... there's no kind of knight h2. No, that would be... no, it's nonsense. To make way for the queen. That doesn't... no. That knight has to sustain the d-pawn as it is, so that would have to be resolved first. Bishop a6 appears to be the threat. And the a-pawn. We don't want to give up the c-file. You can drop the bishop back to b8. Frequently, in d-pawn systems, of course, you see rook a to c1 or to c8. And once that happens, the king's bishop can perhaps tuck itself back without limiting a rook. And then perhaps the queen can come here and make a battery. You know, those kinds of ideas. Not exactly in this position. But once the queen's rook has moved, you might be able to tuck it back here on b8, where it also sustains the a-pawn. So that is a common idea. I'm not saying that's the way to proceed here, but that is, you'll see it, and sometimes it's very useful. What you don't want is the bishop on b8 with the rook on a8. That's... how is your rook going to join in the game? Have that worked out before you play the bishop b8. Let me check on Las Vegas real quick. I don't even know what round it is there. It's round 4, maybe? It's still in round 3. What? Yeah, there's nothing. No news to report from there. Queen e2. Hasn't Lenderman been coach for the Olympiad team? Right? Maybe not at the last Olympiad, but at the prior Olympiad, the in-person. I think he was. let's discuss one of these possibilities. Computer saying 94, okay. Well, knight e4, knight e4. When you have a queenside fianchettoed bishop with a, well, on the queen side, it's going to be the d pawn on its color, on the diagonal. What you would like to do is to get this pawn to e4. And similarly with the white pieces, if you get a pawn on e5, you kick the defender, the best defender of the castled king, the knight. So if it's gone, if you're the white pieces, you have a pawn on e5, you're attacking the king side. And if you're the black pieces, you're attacking the king side. So you're trying to use that bishop. What you don't want is your own bishop to just basically be out of play by it having this pawn purely limiting it and the bishop doing nothing. So if you're playing systems where you're fianchettoing queenside and your bishop is giving you no action, you're going to want to play a little more dynamically with that bishop's potential with the X-ray. These Queen's Indian systems are, if they backfire, they can really backfire. They can go badly with that bishop. Very, I don't want to say simply, that's not the right word, but you can get nothing very easily if you're unwary or you just play a little too casually, perhaps. Now in this game, has every move been obvious? No, but for students who are trying to crack in to the expert section, the open section, first of all, you're playing with a lot more time than you were at the local quads. And you're going to see this. A lot of you go to multi-day tournaments, and you're not playing yet in the open or expert section. You're playing U1800, you're playing U1500, and you'll go and watch some of the other boards, some of the other sections, the higher sections, and just watch. Maybe, assuming you have the schedule bandwidth to do so. And one thing you'll see with younger players is at some point they're going to just stop. They're going to, play their opening, and then they're going to just stop moving and go into think for that middle game transition. As in, if there's no obvious move, have a plan. And players who, you're going to have to get used to that. You can't, very rarely, can the player, maintain that tempo of G30 and just continue that where you don't really have time for a plan. You don't really need one in U1200, U1500 necessarily. You don't need one at all. So you just go, every move is obvious. Or you have plenty of good choice. Whereas against Lenderman, that's not the case at all. It's the exact opposite. You're walking on a tightrope above a cliff, and you have no net, no nothing. You can't fall. So you better know what you're doing, meaning you have to figure out what it is you're looking at. And you're going to go in a long think, to figure out the plan. And you're probably not going to get to execute your plan step by step per se. No. But the process of going through and gathering the information, comparing and contrasting, and formulating a plan based on the position at hand, what you can actually do with what you have compared to what they have and what they can do. It's going to save you time because you're going to have similarities in future positions that have to do with what you were looking at. Not everything will change immediately, assuming you're doing things correctly and things do not wildly change. Something out of left field, or somebody does something perhaps a bit unexpected. But it's an investment in time. It's an investment in time because you're not going to spend 20 minutes every single move. No, you're going to spend 15 minutes to come up with a plan, 20 minutes to come up with a plan just for that one move. And then when you start implementing the plan, it's going to come a lot quicker. And if you actually get said plan, well, hats off to you. That usually is not the case. And of course, have a plan, especially in chess. Plan 2 games, have a plan, otherwise you'll be part of somebody else's plan. But if there is an obvious move, you don't need a plan. You don't need a plan if there is an obvious move. Just blunder check the move. Otherwise, you better have a plan. Get used to it. The mobile chair. With regard to the bishop f8 that we see here, the computer recommending, bishop f8, when the rook has vacated, when black castle's short, and the rook vacates f8, it makes a hole for a minor piece. And if you've played h6, you may well play the bishop to f8 for more security for your king. You might say it's a Spanish, you might play g6 and then put the bishop on g7. g6 in order to keep a knight out of f5. That's not the case here. But you'll see that in a Spanish. You may well see a knight go to f8 instead when f8 is free. And especially if you can't have a knight on f6, you're going to want a knight on f8 to play defense. The knight on f8, there's that old saying, of course, never a mate with the knight on f8. If you have a knight on f8, and there's a checkmating threat on h7, say with a battery with the bishop and queen. This is just to illustrate the idea of knight on f8, never a mate with a knight on f8. This battery is stopped by the knight on f8. And say they're attacking instead, say the battery is moved over and they're hitting g7, well, your knight can go to e6 to sustain, g7. Say they're attacking f7, your knight can go to e6 to shield the f7 pawn if they're attacking from this direction. The knight can also go to g6 to shield If they're attacking on the g file with the rook and a queen, perhaps, or they're just coordinating in that direction, you can play knight to g6. So the knight on f8 is a very useful defender. It's not going to be the superhero and do it all by itself, but it can play a lot of defense. I don't like bishop f8 because then you can't play bishop b8. Bishop b8 that's just a temporary idea. You can't play a queen c7 with the bishop b8 because of the c file. It's going to open up too much pressure on it for the queen to be there. Bad x-ray with the rook on c1. Let's check the other boards here in Charlotte, the open section. Oh, so that's not the color on chess 24. That's the, is that where the picture that goes or something? You just have a white box by both players' names, which is strange to see in a chess presentation. Because apparently it doesn't refer to the color. One thing that's important, that's I think considerably important these days, for players of that caliber at a very young age, there can be pressure to win something big. And it's like when Steve Young took over for Joe Montana for the 49ers. There was pressure to win a Super Bowl. Otherwise, you're not good enough. It doesn't matter how good you are, whatever your numbers are, blah, blah, blah. You didn't win the big one. So, now that's not always the case, but pressure is real, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but sometimes it's there. So if that student can win a biggie at a very young age and just get it out of the way, just get that out of the way, get the monkey off their back, get the pressure gone, and then they can just have fun and play chess. That is important. And of course, the pressure isn't always there. But if it is, I'm not saying it should be, but if it is, and fellow trainer, fellow coach, you're aware of that, try to work towards getting that student in those type of events where they can get that national championship. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but get the pressure out of the way. Even if it's an unsaid goal, you've got to be wary of these things. Sometimes there's more pressure than there should be on a scholastic player. For whatever the reason, but you have to try to deal with it. Milind won a national championship very young. He was 6. And he played up in that one. I think it was the under 9 junior congress, so he played up as a 6-year-old and won. I'll never forget that. I watched. I wasn't very close. There was, I'm not one of the players at Scholastic, so I'm there watching the last round, and I'll never forget it. Speaking of the 49ers, they were playing the Cleveland Browns that day at home. And speaking of Coach David last stream, talking about Faria chess, where Milind went. Milind went to Faria. He didn't go to the chess class there, but he went to Faria. And Coach David he had passed on the day before he died, and we found out about it the next day. Yeah, I don't think he passed that day. What year would that have been? 2012? U.S. Junior Congress? U.S. Junior Chess Congress, excuse me. Something like that. So bishop to b8, okay. What's Lenderman doing here? Is he going to play this bishop a6? Why would you play bishop a6 now? Maybe there's some sort of idea with the c file? I mean, if you want to give black an isolated d pawn and then try to play against it, nah. I don't know, bishop a6, why would you play it now? Your queen gets kind of... She gets put somewhat out of play. Okay, so why does Lenderman want the queen over there on the queen side? Queen c7, I'm not sure about the x-ring. Think twice about that. It's more straightforward just to take on a6. And queen takes, what is Lenderman trying to do? What is he trying to do? If there's, okay, so take, and queen takes, and then what is the queen doing over here on the queen side? The pawn is sustained once, you can sustain it again. White can't attack it again, so knight b5 is not in the works. So why... What are you doing with the queen? Well, I mean, the computer doesn't evaluate this way, I don't think. But, Lenderman's over 2,700. So a trade, just generally speaking, he's able to play clearly. So the more pieces that come off the board, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing for him, assuming he doesn't suffer from the trade. But there's like a psychological reason, which the computer doesn't use in evaluation. You know, say you're a 1200 playing an 1800. Not that this is the case here, not at all. But for example, you're 1200 playing 1800. The 1200 trades off all the pieces. The 1800 is just going to outplay the 1200 with whatever's remaining on the board, even though material's even. I'm not saying that's the case here. Milind's practically 2400. He hasn't crossed it yet, but he's up there. And Lenderman's over 2700. So this trade, in terms of the queen, may well be out of play, but Lenderman's endgame is probably, he's got more experience than Milind. Although when Milind was young, we worked on the endgame considerably. And it's another reason why Milind was very strong, very young, because he knew what he was looking at in the endgame. And most students, their endgame is terrible. They don't have a clue because they have no experience. And especially when the kid is just really good, really young. They win via tactics. Their opponents just blunder, so they're never in the end game initially. You know, a student will go to 1200. They'll go to 900 after their first quads, then they win the next quads. They'll go to, 1200, 1500 like that. And then they could go to 1800 like that, and without ever getting in an end game. But at some point soon, they're going to start getting in end games. And having that knowledge, you've heard it before 1,000 times, it's like having the answers to a test ahead of time. And you will take the test at some point. You will get those endgames. So we went over Pandolfini's endgame course multiple times with the board and then without a board, blindfolded. Maybe with the board, but no pieces, and it's very important. And shout out to Coach Ted for pointing that out way back. He mentioned we had dinner and he got a flat tire, so he calls me up. Let's go to dinner. So we went to dinner in Cupertino, and that's when Milind was like 5, and of course Milind worked with NorCal as well, worked with Ted, which is wonderful, and focus on the end game. Focus on the end game. Of course, he is correct. But this queen on a6, how do you make that work? I don't get it. You're going to have to, for her to have some play out there, you're going to have to set it up. Can you initiate a trade of... I don't see how you can initiate another minor piece trade. Perhaps this is just about the, trying to keep some space. That may be it. Rook e6? What? It's the 4th suggested move by the engine. It's a little different looking. But it does lift. And it can't be bothered by a knight. Okay. If you had a T stream, would you say welcome to the chat room? Have like another A. And this board, the chess based board, is over the chess bomb chat, which well, if somebody is in their chat, I apologize for covering it up, but that's where I could put this board without getting in the way of something and not have it tiny. Still not sure what Lenderman's doing with that queen e6. And that is, for me personally, that's a little troubling because Lenderman knows what he's doing. I just, out of respect to GM Lenderman, not that if you're the player competing against him, you don't have this attitude. But as somebody just watching, I'm not in Milind's shoes. I'm in my shoes watching my former student play Lenderman. But Lenderman's got to have a bunch of ideas with Queen A6, and how do you get more play over there? But maybe it's not an immediate thing. Or he's just preventing any sort of freeing of the A pawn. That doesn't, I don't know. I just don't see it. The queen's got to move. But of course, if you're the player, don't trust the opponent. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Doesn't matter who the opponent is. Trust yourself. Don't just assume that just because they're, oh, master such and such, that must be a good move because you're a master. That is the wrong attitude to have. The exact wrong attitude to have. All right. Milind takes on d4. Okay, so Milind has an isolated d-pawn. This is an isolated d-pawn. So what are the strategies with an isolated d-pawn? Well, what you want to do, and he's already got rooks on the adjacent files that are half open or open because there's no friendly pawn in the way. You want to be able to use the squares in front of the pawn for minor pieces as a potential outpost. Of course, you can't use c4 here, but you might be able to use e4, maybe. You want to be able to push the pawn, and you want to keep the minor pieces on the board, and you're going to attack kingside. Now, if you're the side playing against the isolated d-pawn, so if you're Lenderman, what you want to do is trade off the minor pieces. So if the knight is off for its counterpart, so on and so forth, whoops, you're going to have just heavy pieces on the board, and you're going to make a battery, Aleksandr gun, and aim at the isolated d-pawn. The opponent will have to sustain with heavy pieces since they can't use a pawn. So trade off the minor pieces, gang up on the pawn, control the square in front of the pawn, use it as an outpost. So it's going to be there's going to be a showdown. Both sides are going to want to control d4, but it's going to be white's. An isolated d-pawn is going to happen regardless of what systems you play. Some players are scared to death of an isolated d-pawn, and it's one of those 50-50 things. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you're going to have it. So don't be categorically opposed to it or with it. One of the local players, NM Splain, I don't know if he still has his website. I always thought that it would be really cool back in the day. I don't know if he could stream for all I know, but Splains it. I always thought that would be It's just I thought that sounded good. But Splain used to have a website on the College of Business site at San Jose State, and his games, he would have his games on the site, and he would break them down and post them. And a lot of those games were isolated deep-ons. And, you can learn a lot from Splain when he splains it or not. Just check out his moves. So you're going to have an isolated deep-on. It's going to happen. So get used to it and know the strategies. If you have it, so Milind here wants to keep these minor pieces on the board. Keep the pawn. Try to use e4 for a piece. You don't want all the minors coming off the board. Lenderman's going to use d4 as a home for a piece. He's going to make sure that he keeps a piece on d4. Okay, so this kind of... The bishop can be sneaky, especially on the rim. So some students have had difficulty with the bishop on the rim. It can kind of hide and it moves diagonally, so don't forget about the bishops. And some players will have potentially a problem piece, a piece that just gives them issues from time to time, and sometimes that piece is a bishop. So if that's you, student at home watching this, or wherever you are, don't lose track of those bishops, especially their x-ray. Don't lose track of that. They can hide. Bishop is like a sniper. It just wants to go somewhere and then stay and then shoot. Speaking of that, I feel like playing Fallout. When the students are playing, I'm not gonna have a game on at the same time. I'm not doing that. If it's some other player who whatever, but not for the old students. No. Nope, nope, nope. Watch the game. So beginning student, we call this here, this relationship between the queen and the bishop, they're on the same diagonal. So beginning student, we call this a battery. And what it does is, I believe I heard this from GM Ashley, it supercharges the pieces. This is a battery. They are working together. They're helping each other out, both offensively and defensively, potentially. So this is a battery. Two long-range pieces on the same line as they move and attack. So a bishop and a queen can form a battery. A rook and a queen can form a battery. Two rooks can form a battery. Three heavy pieces make an Aleksandr gun. So a battery, it supercharges the potential of the pieces. Okay, g3. Is that why some streamers have these fancy chairs? Is to have a quiet chair? Is that it? Or is there more to it? Okay, g3, g3. You want to make sure you're not in any trouble on the C file. Sometimes you'll watch strong players play and they'll just immediately remove their queen off of a bad x-ray just to make sure nothing's happening negative with the x-ray against them. I'm not saying Milind needs to do that now, but White is thinking about ideas with a discovery on the C file. That's where a lot of the play is potentially heading. Okay. So the queen has to move and make sure the knight doesn't go to d3. Where is the knight going next? So when a knight moves in a game of chess, you want to know where is the knight going next. So this knight was, of course, hitting the queen, but where is it going next? Possibly to d3. So this queen had to sustain the d3 square. Always ask yourself, where is the knight going next? It's a tricky piece. It's the only piece that doesn't move linearly. Every other piece moves in a straight line in terms of the squares on the chessboard. The knight does not. So at a glance, you cannot just ascertain, for a beginning player, where the knight is going next. You might have to take a little more time. Knights can be tricky. Beginning players out there, beginning students, one of the reasons why beginners lose, and it's fine to lose, I'm not saying it's a problem, but one of the reasons why beginners lose is a knight fork, because they're not looking to see where the knight is going next. Queen f1. Well, okay, so she's been driven out of a6. You still have to concern yourself with the x-ray, because the longer the queen stays on the c file with this rook here, this knight is going to either have a discovery potential now or after some sort of kick to this knight on c5. So the queen should leave the c file. X-ray is not to be underestimated. It's in the local quads, local Swiss. Is X-ray a big deal? No. X-ray is not a big deal locally. That is sloppy. I assumed it'd be a lot easier to write legibly with a mouse, but it isn't. A lot easier to do anything else with a mouse than write cleanly. But X-ray, you play U1200, U1500, not a big deal. No, unless there's a tactic, of course. Uh, but it's can be more. There can be more to it, as in setting up the tactic if the player is negligible of X-ray. So another thing about X-ray, pretend the long-range pieces can jump. The bishop, the rook, the queen. Pretend they can jump on their lines of attack. Now, if there's a good line of attack, get whatever's in the way out of the way. So jump attack. Now, of course, the long-range pieces can't jump. We're not playing a variant. We're talking orthodox chess. But to seek play with that X-ray, pretend the long-range pieces can jump. And see if you have anything. And if so, get whatever's in the way out of the way. I wish I could. Can I bring up the text? It didn't work last time. I still haven't played around with the paint. So if I was able to type, I would type pretend the long-range pieces can jump. But hopefully you can hear this, so you can write it down yourself. All right. Queen E5. For those beginners at home, wondering about a move such as F4, does it attack the queen? Yes. However, it makes E3 and e4 weak forever, as in this f pawn can no longer sustain e3 or e4 the rest of the game. So long term, that would be very bad. So beware moving pawns. It's forever. Meaning pawns such as that. In front of the castled king, unnecessarily. That can be very double-edged. And when do we see that? You know, pawns moving in front of the castle king backfire. Well, you know, once again, U1200, well, actually at every level you can see it backfire. But when, meaning, sometimes it's appropriate to move a pawn in front of the castle king, such as the f-pawn. Some players will struggle with those decisions, as in they'll move it incorrectly and it'll backfire, and then sometimes they'll move it correctly and sometimes they won't move it at all and need it to move it. There can be a lot of situationalness with moving the f-pawn that the expert player is going to have to work through. Just watch the space left behind. Watch the space left behind. And of course, the computer suggesting f4 now that I said that. Not here, rook c2, knight e6, f4. Oh no, Stockfish. Rook c to d1. Huh? Well, you don't see that every day. In the Queen's Gambit decline system, where the c1 rook leaves the open c file. Not so typical. What is he doing? I get putting a rook on the d file. So does this mean he's going to work in some sort of action in the center? There's no way white can break in the center. Why this rook and not the other rook? I don't understand rook c to d1 versus the other rook. So white is just going to allow black to have the c-file because they can't do much with it? Is that it? There's no invasion on the c-file with the knight on d4 and the bishop on b2 and the pawn on b3. So that's, I guess that's the idea. You can't do anything with the c-file, so he's going to, for the moment, yeah. This might have to do, Lenderman's usage of the queen's rook instead of the king's rook on d1 may well be to prevent tactics on g3. So you sustain the e3 pawn. Move that chair around here. Better cheddars. Okay, so there's more x-ray to concern black with here. Got a bishop with x-ray on the queen. So this knight has tension. It's going to want to get out of the way. So this queen should move. h5. What is h5 about? White doesn't want to play g4. I don't understand that at all. Oh, is that's it then? h5, h4. Okay. So where do you put the queen? Well, if you go to d6, you can get hit. And you want to stay on the diagonal. You don't want to slide laterally, I don't think. You run out of real estate. If this queen slides laterally, she runs out of real estate real quick. There's just not a lot of room to maneuver. And is there really any coordination? Unless there's a trick, you have no business sliding laterally. You're going to want a queen that's not vulnerable. Very vulnerable. When you go to d6, you can get hit. You go to c7, you can get hit, but you're back in your territory. You're back in your camp. So your queen will be, generally speaking, she'll be safe. You don't want, this is not the opening, don't bring your queen out early because she's going to get attacked. But you don't want a vulnerable queen. Everything else being equal. Ooh, h5. Okay, okay. Nice. So what are we gonna see here by Lenderman? What is? I mean, he can do. He can try to put that e2 9 on d3. He can go to f4. Fianchetto the queen for defense. I don't like that, but you've got to play defense on the king side. You can't play knight c1 d3 without a helper on g3. Okay, queen g2. I don't. The queen. You can call it fianchettoed or not. I don't think it's technically correct, but everybody knows what you mean. It's fianchetto. CH sounds like a K in Italian. As I understand it, I don't speak Italian. I did watch The Godfather a couple days ago. Not that that counts at all. It doesn't. A very well done movie. Extremely violent. It's interesting that you root for the bad guys in that movie. They present it that way. It's a closed universe. Very interesting. That's the kind of movie, The Godfather. I have it. I've owned it for over 20 years. My grandpa had it, taped it off of Cinemax or HBO back whenever it was. But I have it on DVD. But that's the kind of movie when it's on TV, and I wasn't at home. I don't have television at home. Uh, but when it's on TV, if I'm happen to be someplace where there's a television, that's the kind of movie you'll watch on television even though you own it. Sounds weird, but some movies are like that. They're that good. Sometimes, you watching a movie. Anyways, back to the chess. Queen g2. Okay. So that put the brakes on h4. How do you improve this position? Ooh. The space on the queen side, I don't I don't know if you want that. The computer saying b5, b4. Yee. I don't know. You were going to see a bishop a1. There's going to be Lenderman's going to set up tension on this diagonal. You can bank on that. So the queen is going to still have to move, of course, at some point, and leaving her here, playing this b5, b4. You know why? You're gonna have to move the queen anyways. You might want to prophylactically just move the queen here. Thing if you can get this queen to d7, if you can get her here, you'll have a direct attacker on h3, which somebody's going to have to defend. And the queen appears to be pretty safe on this square. So either queen c7, queen d6, those make sense. Bishop d6, I don't like. It's more active for the bishop, yes. However, where's your queen going after bishop a1? I don't think I want to necessarily address that position. On a good day it'd be nice, but nah. Bishop d6 is a little too limiting for the queen. Too many allies surrounding her movement options. Or inhibiting her movement options. Perhaps I should try using the analysis board, but it's a little late in the game to be doing this now. We might try that tomorrow. The round times tomorrow are the same as today. Wednesday, it's a little different. So is Thursday. And if Charlotte ever isn't live with Milind, and one of the other students is live in Vegas, we'll stream that also. But they didn't have Shakat was live, but they didn't have the PGN going. Clock is somewhat of a concern, slightly. Lenderman may try to push that to his advantage, as in just make the game go longer, because he's got a lot more clock to work with. And he is much higher rated, and generally that means the stronger player. I'm not saying that's the case here. I wouldn't say that. Even if it was true, I wouldn't say that about one of my students. Like, oh yeah, they're not as good as their opponent. No, they're able to do just the same. Just maybe more difficult against somebody like Lenderman. And here we're beyond move 20, and those of you students at home watching this, no matter what year this is, where you are, if you're one of my students, former students, you should be able to make it to move 20 against any human being on Earth. I don't care who it is. You should be able to make it to move 20. Now, you might be technically losing, but you should have something to play with in the game. You may be down a pawn, you may be down 2 pawns. Yeah, I know. If you're playing Vichy, yeah, okay, I get it. But typically that's not the case. And you can make it to move 20 by dealing with threats as best you can with the right attitude and avoiding mistakes. You can make it to move 20. Milind did play h4. Wow, okay. What is he trying to do? He can't bring the other knight to h5, can he? Milind is seeking play here. You don't just play h4 in this position. I was talking about the blunder check. Is the move safe? No, it's not safe. Of course, it doesn't end there. So he's trying to kick up some dust. I tell you, these kids out here have no fear, and they shouldn't. No kid should have fear of their opponent over the chessboard ever. But as a trainer, as a coach, we need to make sure our students know that chess does not care how old you are, where you're from, how tall you are, nothing. What your gender is, it doesn't matter. Chess does not care. Make sure your students know they're equal to everyone else. That's one of the terrific things about chess. Everybody is equal. Yeah, that's the way it is. It's the way it should be. So some of these students out here they know they can play, and they're looking for an opportunity, for a challenge, and for rating points. In this case, maybe for a norm. I don't mean this game, but you know what I mean, the attitude. They're going for it. Because they've got, what do you have to lose? You're 300 points, 350 points lower rated than your opponent. You've got nothing to lose. I'm not saying h4 doesn't come without risk. No, but sometimes when you're that lower rated player and you have a somewhat of a window or you have a chance, just take it. Throw your hat over the wall to make yourself go get it. Sometimes that's the right move. That's the right attitude to have, to go for it. You've got nothing to lose. And frequently out here, now this is in Charlotte. I've never been to North Carolina. I don't know anything about it. In terms of the chess there, but this is clearly different. This is not a state level, clearly. But you've got to you've got to take your chances when you can. And this is another, out here, if it's say, let's subtract 1,000 from the ratings. So let's say we've got a 1,700 playing a 1,400. And let's say the age difference is there as well. Say it's a kid, a local kid who's the underdog. I'm not saying that Milind is a kid anymore. But out here, if it's an adult who's higher rated than a kid, I would argue this is not in the experts, even maybe in the expert section, depending on the particulars of whose. But kid versus adult in the South Bay, the kid is the higher rated player who's not the kid may well have a lot of pressure on them because they know they're playing some kid who's doing a zillion tactics on a regular basis, who has been improving month after month, year after year, studying, and some adult whose rating has stagnated, whose rating is forever 1850 or forever 1950 or 2000 or whatever, they're not improving. Whereas the student is, the younger player is. There's a lot more pressure on that adult. So throw the ratings out the window. These young players out here, they go for it. And that attitude does put pressure on the opponent. And some adults out here, they hate playing kids. But in chess, you don't have a choice. If you don't want to play younger players, you should pick a different game. Or just never age. I don't know how you do that. I wouldn't want to know how to do that. Well, I do know one way to do that, but that means you're not living anymore. So h4, nice. Okay, this is clearly interesting. And Milind's playing h4 with 30 on the clock. Didn't take. What is Milind's plan here? We want to make sure that knight f5 is not a problem. So g6 is logical. Yeah, knight f5 is the threat. Can't allow knight f5. So g6, g6. I mean right now, but take away the idea. Yeah, the rain stopped. Should play that song, not on stream. Here comes the rain again. It's gonna come again. That is a good song. Bonus point, student. Whenever it is you're watching this, if you can name that band. Here comes the rain. Depending on who you are watching this, students, but when I was your age, that was a very popular song. And still is to this day. That's when music was good. That's a really good song. Gee. Anyways, back to the chess. The strategy you'll see stronger players use is simply to extend the game, add moves to it. One of the differences, as we know, students, but one of the differences between strong players and everyone else is the frequency of mistake. Strong players, such as Lenderman, Grandmaster Lenderman, is not going to make a mistake very often. So the longer the game goes, the more it favors the stronger player, based on that logic. And especially with the clock difference here. So Lenderman may just be trying to keep pieces on the board, extend the game, extend the game, extend the game, and that will put more pressure on the black pieces. I'm not saying that's going to be the case here. Milind can flat out play, don't get me wrong. Always has been able to. But stronger players will use that approach. They will just grind down the opponent, whether it's with the position, with the clock as well. Just get to that end game and just continue to play. They don't have to do all the fancy schmancy. They know the gambits, they know the risque openings, and know when they might be able to push. But do they have to do that? Do they have to commit to that push with a little bit of risk, or can they simply slow play it with no risk? When Coach Ricardo used to play locally, of course now he's in the Philippines. If you're watching this, Coach Ricardo, hello, Balitang. He could do all this. He could just try to play something that would win a little quicker, but he would just grind him down. He'd let the opponent make the first mistake, and then continue to grind him down, let them make the second mistake, and then he wins. That's it. If he's playing 1200, that was his approach. He's playing 1500, that was his approach. He's playing 1800, that was his approach. Playing 2100, that was his approach. And then he'd show up late in the last round and get the check for clear first and leave. And I'll say this for those of you, trainers, coaches, work with somebody like that in the same classroom with them watching your lecture because it will put you on your toes. I worked with Ricardo at Nixon where we alternated. We were in the library at Nixon in the city of Stanford. And shout out to those kids. Those are some great kids at Nixon. And we'd alternate every week. He would teach, he'd have the lecture, then the next week I would lecture, and he'd be watching, and so on and so forth. So number one, it's cool to you get paid to listen to Ricardo talk chess. Yes, sign me up for that gig. And then he's in the audience when you're lecturing, so you better bring it. You can't bring some watered down slop. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to work at all. So it's a really good learning opportunity, and of course a lot of fun. You're not going to win any games when you play. I lost every time, but it's not about me winning and losing. That's not what it's about. It made me a much stronger coach, and it was a lot of fun. And kids had a blast too. Nixon kids usually have a good time. When I was at Nixon, there were some really strong players in that last full year, 2019, of instruction at Nixon. There were some really strong players in that class. There were some goofball, there was all sorts. Yan Gao was in that class, and he ended up moving back to China. I've known that kid forever. So him, in addition to all the other Nixon students that I was instructing there, it was a really good group, pretty strong, and played a lot of other games too. A lot of the kids were playing D&D in that class, which was they always got bonus points if they played in a campaign that week. Boom, bonus point. Maybe that's not fair, but they can try to play a tabletop RPG as well. I didn't give bonus points for video games. It's one thing I've never done. Yeah, okay, G6. F3 is the... yeah, I don't know about that. For those beginners at home, we have a general bit of advice. Now, the computer likes F3 here. But for beginning chess, and this is the opposite of beginning chess, but in beginning chess class, whoever's saying don't move the F-pawn, just don't move it. Don't. Why? If it backfires, your king is exposed, maybe on this diagonal if you don't have the F-pawn, perhaps if it's uncastled on E1, on the H4 E1 diagonal, on the king side where you don't have any blocking options, if you've moved the G-pawn to say G4. So for beginners, don't move the F-pawn. And of course this is not a beginning level game. This is a game in the open section, but this is a U2100 stream. So at some point, beginners are going to watch this. So don't move the F-pawn. Where's that knight going next? May well be going to D3 to hit the queen. Where does black find play here? King side is locked up. Queen is vulnerable in multiple ways. Eventually, at some point, she will have to move. And the clock as well. The clock is concerned. But playing the word of the day in my chess classes, and not way back then. And those of you who are in any of the group classes, I don't mean the club. I don't mean the club. The club is different. But if you've been to one of my group classes, and I don't mean after school, I mean my own Let's Play Chess group classes on the weekends, on a Saturday or a Sunday, it started at Milind's home. That's where we started on Sunday mornings, way back. That was it. We started the group class there. So those of you who've been to Ome on Saturday mornings, on Saturday afternoons, whether you were in the beginning class or the intermediate class, or if you were at Ome on a Friday night, or even LOK on a Friday night, in the tournament prep classes, those all started at Milind's home. Over 10 years ago, something like that. Still remember a lot of those classes and moments. Remember doing out of the Jeremy Silman Reassess Your Chess book, the second edition, not the workbook, which is a terrific workbook, the silver one, not that one, but the Reassess Your Chess second edition, where Silman puts the money on the board for the opposition, and you've got the king on white king on a1 and the black king on a8 and money. So I put dollar bills on f8, g8, and h8, that drill, white to play and win, and it's all about the opposition. And I still remember at Milind's home when we did that, those kids were going nuts. That is one of the best lessons you could possibly do, because it's not about money, but kids don't see money on the chessboard, and it's not, you're not bribing them. It's not that, but it's different. It's exciting. And the kids were jumping off the couch with excitement, learning the opposition with Silman's idea of money on, the white king steps foot on f8 or g8 or h8, it wins. It can pick up the money and win. Black cannot win by stepping foot on those squares. You win by keeping the white king out of f8, g8, and h8. So it's a terrific, let me illustrate it here. So you clear the board, and you've got the black king on a8, and you've got the white king on a1, and there's nothing else on the board, but you've got money. So I don't know what the denomination was, but maybe it wasn't $100 bill, I'll tell you that. But it could have been a 20. You put money here, and I was using a demo board, so I could hang the paper on the board. And if you're, using a vinyl board, a tournament board, you can put a coin, have the kids get a couple of coins, put the coins on those squares, white to play. And don't tell them it's white to play and win. Don't let them know that. And this is great for classes of any level. And this is all about the opposition. It's all about the opposition. Whoa. What happened here? Hang on. And don't give money to students in chess class. They're gonna find the move. Give them points instead, but never give them money. You'll go broke out here. They will find the move. Even if you don't think they can find it, believe me, if there's money on the table, they'll find it. Knight c3. these pieces come off the board, it favors white with regard to the D pawn. Gotta watch for D5 here. Play against D5. There's a lot of X-ray on D5. I mean, you've got the queen directly hitting D5. You've got the knight directly hitting D5, and you've got the rook, which is currently on, it's under attack, but you've got this knight F3. Watch D5 here. What is... Well, okay, it's about D5. It's also about C3. So... yeah, something's coming off the board here. 87. Well, this is about the D pawn here. And white has been able to coordinate effectively against it and stop any kind of play that Milind was seeking. And of course, you can always try to trade off that isolana. Not that that was applicable here. The next round, in round 4 in Vegas, is in 45 minutes. Do they have pairings up? Excuse me. Okay, so down a pawn. So one of the most commonly violated plans in my students' experiences in chess is when there's a material imbalance, the plan is to trade pieces evenly to reduce the opponent's. Well, now, if you're the white pieces here, if you're Lenderman, you want to trade pieces evenly. So you want to just, let's trade the queen for the queen. I know it's not possible in this exact position, but you know what I mean. Trade the knight for the bishop. Trade the rook for the rook, and so on and so forth. Not the black rook for the black rook, you know what I mean. Now, if all those trades happen, first of all, white is still up material, and black has really nothing to attack white with. So white is going to create a passer and then promote. So you trade pieces evenly. When you're up material, you trade pieces evenly to reduce the opponent's ability to attack you. You disarm the opponent. There's other reasons as well, but that is the primary reason why. So if you're Lenderman, there's nothing else better to do. That is what you do. So we're going to see some sort of like queen f6 or something. Or knight f6, you know. You can't allow anything f6, so king g7. White is going to pile up on the D file and start initiating some sort of trade of something. Now, when you don't trade, when you're up material and you don't trade pieces evenly, and not pawns, mind you, pieces. The only time you don't trade is when it makes your position more difficult to play. If by trading you give the opponent more play, then don't trade. Just improve your position, but don't trade. You don't always have to trade. You typically do, but it's not a 100% kind of thing. It's 90%, but not 100%. And we don't play chess by the numbers. This isn't gambling. It's by specifics of the position. And each position is unique, assuming it is. Don't play the numbers. These types of, this is a technical win for Lenderman, but these types of positions can be very beneficial to the student. I don't mean Milind here in this case, but having a drill where the student is up a pawn or two, up an exchange, and then has a winning, theoretically won position, but has to then convert and play it out against you, against the computer online, whatever it is. That can be very helpful because they're going to have those positions and need to convert. And the opponent is going to seek and play. Just because they're down doesn't mean they're resigning. So those drills can be very, very effective. I wonder how postmortems are handled in the pandemic. If they're a lot less frequent, if they're prohibited altogether, I have no idea. Imagine there's a Skittles room of some sort, but perhaps not. I don't know. Here at this tournament, now maybe this is just for this section, all the equipment is provided. In Las Vegas, it's not the case. This weekend, now. It's not the weekend, it's Monday. Today's Monday? Today's Monday. So I'm sure it's up to the organizer, the organization that's hosting it, as to whether or not they have this or that provided or not provided. But otherwise, you play Lenderman, you're going to want to post-mortem. Win, lose, or draw. This is one of the top players in the world. Is this the strongest player a former student of mine has ever played? No, it's not. But this is up there. This is up there. And Lenderman, I played Milind last week in Charlotte. That's a game I haven't seen yet. I'm assuming they actually played. I didn't see it, but they were scheduled to, of course. But this is a pretty tough opponent, and this is including everything, simul's, whatever. Highest rated player we ever had at the club to play the students. We had Vadim Milov come to play the students, and that guy was scary fast. That guy was really fast. Really fast. It was funny. I pick up Milov from NorCal House of Chess, bring him to the club in Santa Clara. When we used to meet there, some of you students, we were there over 10 years, And Milov asks me, before the simul, he goes, "Do you want anybody to draw? Maybe it's a kid's birthday or something." And I'd never been asked that question before, so I said no. He goes, "Okay," and then proceeds to just destroy everybody. Adi, he had an interesting position. He had something, but Milov was playing so quickly, so fast. It was scary fast. Like I would instantly move all the time at every single board. He was on top of the students repeatedly. There was so much pressure on the kids. That guy was top 30 at one point. I don't recall his peak rating. This is, of course, different. This is mano y mano. We had Eno Sidora at the club. Eno was tired. He did camp at NHC, and then pick him up after summer camp all day. So he's tired and he's getting ready for the World Cup before his during his visit to us, and he's doing push-ups. And I don't know Eno's what rating he's gone up to, but he's drawn Magnus, so that's good. We lost every game against Sidora, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we lost every game against Sidora. It was funny watching him do push-ups in between moves. It was very energetic, a lot of fun. We had Susan Polgar visit the club, but she just came to give a talk, which was fantastic. But had she played, she would have been the strongest, of course. White is going to make it, so put a rook on the fourth rank, and the king is going to have a nice little fortress there. That's you can't get to it on f1. You can go to the e file, perhaps. Well, you're probably not going to have to. hydration device. Right. Well, I mean, this queen, this initial, okay, when Lenderman plays queen e2 initially, with the idea of bishop a6, just the threat of the queen going to a6, you know, the bishop going to b8 has been somewhat out of play compared to its whatever counterpart you want to compare it to of white's. So the queen going out of play on a6 very temporarily and then coming back into play, you could perhaps argue that the bishop going to b8, which was not the only choice, but that bishop will remain out of play unless it comes back into play via, say, d6, which was kind of awkward to work in this middle game. So that's it's a very patient play there. That's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but the queen can certainly come back into play easier than bishop can. Squeaky chair. Suppose I could do some. I can't do anything about the squeakiness of the chair now. And I've never used any anti-squeak measures on a chair, to be honest. But I do have WD-40 here. I don't know where to spray it. Let me check that. Lenderman was in that Charlotte GM Norm tournament. Let me hang on. They drew. Wow. So Lenderman drew Milind a week ago. I haven't seen this game yet. I'm checking it out now. Yeah, okay. Have to look at that quite a bit later. Tactics, 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 tactics. Yeah. Now, those of you, beginning, intermediate, quote, advanced, whatever, if you're not playing in the expert or open section, let me tell you, the tactical strength of a grandmaster is considerable. I'm not speaking specifically about Lenderman, but in my experience, they, in all the simuls we've had at the club, how often has a GM tactically blundered? Physically at the board in a simul, I mean, hardly ever. Certainly less than half a dozen times. Their tactics are that good. They are their tactics are that good. I'm not trying to, make the viewer scared. Not at all. Your tactics can be good as well, but they don't. With a different gym, I remember at the what was it called? Northern California International at NHC, and they had a double there, double day, 2 rounds in one day, something similar to this, and I'm there watching the second round. Some of the students are there. And this was funny because it was on a school night and some of the kids are there drinking cola at, 9 p.m. Oh, wow. Those kids are not going to sleep ever, right? So that was funny. Anyways, uh, when the round is finishing up, Ted asked me, he goes, "Hey, can you give Georgie a ride home to where he's staying in Fremont?" I go, "Yeah, sure." So I'm GM Margus View, Georgie. I've never, met him beforehand. I haven't seen him since, but give him a ride. And we're driving, 5-10 minutes in Fremont. He was hungry, so stopped and got him something to eat, and then drove him to where he was staying in Fremont. And so he goes, "Yeah. So what do you do?" I go, "I coach, and I was making the chess calendar back then." And this is a true story. All you students have heard this story. Well, maybe not all the recent ones, but you old time students, you've all heard this story. So the chess calendar, the daily chess calendar, I show it to him. I happen to have it in, there in the car. So I go, "Oh yeah, I do this." and he opens to a random page. And I worked for months on this, and their positions from historic games, from obscure games, from all the chess literature I had back in 2006, 2007, 2005. It was just tactical positions from there that I liked. And he flipped to some random page. Oh, this one. Blah, 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 blah. Rattled off the line, told me who played it, when and where, verified it in less than a second, and then flipped to the next page and did that. And now that Georgie had just been playing 2 FIDE rated games for 10 hours, whatever it was, all day long. He was hungry, he was tired, so on and so forth. He rattled off 30 straight, like that. Boom, 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 boom. Even the obscure ones that I got from, like a CJS Purdy Australian, but the obscure ones, he got every single one. Not only correct, but he knew more than just the answer in the line. And these are not one move problems. Some of these were 10 move combinations, some even longer. He knew the who, what, the where, the when, and the how. He knew everything about it. I was blown away. GMs don't miss tactics. They just don't. They just don't. Their tactics are that good, in my experience. Guy went to UMBC. You're going to update the live boards in Vegas or what? So the king is sustaining the queen on f3. This is an important example, a situation in chess where you liquidate in the endgame, liquidate to the endgame. And the side with the stronger position has to be on the lookout for those opportunities to exchange into a one endgame, to completely simplify the position. it's important for players to be on the lookout for those opportunities and to try to steer the game in that direction. As we see here, there's going to be a lot of pieces coming off the board. That's a good book. Liquidation in the Endgame. Or Liquidation to the Endgame? Liquidation in the Endgame? That's it's a useful, very useful subject matter for the advanced student. You know, the student trying to make expert, that kind of stuff. Because you'll be able to control your own destiny and trade down. Don't like F4 here. King F3, sure. Activate the king. The king is a strong piece in the endgame. And the endgame, what is the endgame? The endgame is the phase of the game where it is safe for the king to activate. So the king can come out without a fear of significant attack, meaning it's not going to get checkmated. Now there can be queen and pawn endings, but typically the queen is off the board in an endgame. Otherwise the king cannot activate. Too dangerous. No, F4. So that knight isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay put on C4. Going to see the king move into F3 here. Well, interesting game. Interesting game. really nice opportunity for Milind to play against somebody like Lenderman again for the second time in I think less than a week. You know, take advantage of that. The Milind went for it. Let's see. Let me see how I can do this here. Whoops. Okay, c4, yeah, c6, knight c3. Okay. Bishop b8 now, huh? Hmm. Yeah, this is a big moment here. It's bishop b8. And now the bishop is somewhat, it's got less pop than its counterpart as the game goes on. This queen gets out of, the white queen gets out of there, and now the bishop is kind of stuck in that little corner. I mean, it's just, it's some, I mean, it could be more active, let's put it that way. h4, so Lenderman keeps it locked up with regard to his king side. And here is giving up the d pawn. This is a difficult position to come up with anything concrete here for black. Knight h7, you know, where's the knight going next? I don't want to have to play knight h7 in this position as black. Yeah, moving a queen, I get that. You're in some x-ray. Gonna have to move her at some point. a5, ooh, I don't like a5 so much. This is just a technical wrap up for Lenderman. Well, always cool to see a former student doing really well over the board. Believe me, Milind will get a lot out of this game and overall experience. Any of his live games I will stream, my schedule permitting, the next couple of days. And that's true for any of my old students playing, whether they're in Las Vegas or Charlotte, North Carolina. Speaking of Vegas, do they have the pairings up? Well, maybe they have the pairings up. Do they have the live boards ready? I need it. They don't have. They've only got what, 10? They don't have their board set up, so I don't know if I can stream. I mean, if there's. Can I see the standings? Hang on. Where can I see the standings for Yeah, I don't care about round two. I know round two standings. I don't care. Care about after round three. Events. Blah blah blah. I mean, do I have to wait another couple of minutes because you can't pre-populate the live boards? Kind of weak. Yeah. Well, I think we'll probably wrap it up here. Let's go back here. All right. Well, this was Grandmaster Aleksandr Lenderman with the white pieces against FIDE Master Milind Maiti. The pride of Cupertino. Proud of you, Milind. Always have been, as I am all of my students, no matter when, even future students. I guess I'm proud of you. I don't know. It's weird. But we'll be back, I guess, tomorrow. It's going to be noon. 9 a.m. They start at noon Eastern time, so 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back. How many? Well, how many boards do they have? Hang on. How many boards do they live stream from Charlotte? They live stream quite a few. I'm not sure how the cookie will crumble, but if Milind is playing, excuse me, I'll stream it live on Twitch. All right, so we'll stop it there. Thank you for watching. Next stream may well be tomorrow, 9 a.m. If one of the kids is playing on the open section in a couple of minutes, I guess I'll stream that, but I don't see it set up on the Follow Chess website. So we'll stop it there today. This will go up on YouTube, and thank you for watching. We'll see you.